In this episode, I speak with Josee. She tells me of her three different birth experiences and how they have shaped her into being the woman that she is today. Her first birth, under the care of an OB, created the perfect recipe for unnecessary interventions that led to a vacuum extraction for a quote unquote too small pelvis. After that experience, Josee felt as though her body was broken, but kept questioning if all that had happened to her was even necessary. Then moving forward, Josee wanted to do things differently, so she hired a local medical midwife to have a home birth. During this birth, the overreaching fear of the medical midwife led to an unnecessary transfer and completely botched golden hour. For her third, Josee took her power back completely to birth her baby without any medical providers. Only having her mother present, Josee was able to have the birth and the golden hour that she had been envisioning for so long. Listen to this wonderful story that Josee tells of trusting herself and doing the work in order to create the birth experience and immediate postpartum time that she'd always been hoping for. Hi, Josee. So thank you so much for joining me today and speaking about your birth experiences.
Yes, thank you so much for having me.
No worries. I'm very excited to get into this conversation and to hear what you have to say. So, the first question that I want to ask you is, what is your ancestry and lineage that you're passing down to your children?
So I am Métis Cree, originating from the Red River settlement in Manitoba, Canada.
Wow.
Mhm.
Okay, amazing. Thank you. And then the second question, my favorite question to ask, apart from that first one, is where does your motherhood journey begin?
Mhm. So I really thought that it began during my first pregnancy, whenever I became pregnant. But looking back now, I feel like it started right as I was a child. I've always been just obsessed with babies. I've always had this weird interest in mothers. I remember always asking to go to baby showers and having these connections with moms that were expecting, and um, just really wanting to know their birth stories, really wanting to hear about their pregnancy experience at such a young age. And I thought maybe I was just nosy,
Mhm.
or maybe I just, wanted this information. But I realize now that I just have always had this love for motherhood from the
Mhm.
very beginning. So, yeah, it started very early for me.
Mhm. Excellent. Yeah, I'm kind of similar in the same way. I was always the one that wanted to be with the mothers and, wanted to hang out with all the baby cousins and hold them.
Yes.
Yeah, it's just a nice energy. Yeah.
Mhm.
Um, so then do you want to go into that first pregnancy and everything that leads up to the birth and postpartum
Yes.
experience?
Yeah. So with my first son, I was quite young. I was 20. And so at the time, I really wasn't researching. I wasn't doing anything. I really didn't even know where to look when it came to prenatal care. So I just kind of took my mom's advice. She told me about an OB. And so that's who I ended up reaching out to and had throughout my whole prenatal journey. Um, I also was just planning to birth in a hospital. During that time, I didn't really like research birth. I didn't really look into what it was. I just knew that I would go to the hospital and I'd leave with my baby and everything would be beautiful. And I had no idea of postpartum or what to expect or anything. I was just so naive going into it. But also just in this like very confident stage, even though I didn't really know much about it. So um, yeah, my pregnancy was very just easygoing. And once the big day came, I only had one really small contraction and just immediately drove to the hospital. I don't know why I didn't think to like labor at home or do anything. I just was so excited that we just up and left. And so when I arrived, I wasn't very far along. Obviously, it was my very first contraction. And so I still had quite a long labor journey to go. Um, and so they had me walking the halls and trying to get things moving faster. And luckily, I was already 4 centimeters when I showed up, so they were allowing me to stay. Um, I remember laboring in like the shower and just trying to keep things going as naturally as possible. And eventually my mom, who was with me, and also just the nurses kind of got me nervous, thinking that it could be a long haul because I had gone about 8 hours without any progress at all, though my contractions were still quite steady and strong. And so at that point, I kind of felt pressured into an epidural, which I was totally fine with at the time. I was like, give me whatever. And so I got the epidural, and things went really quickly. I took a nap and I woke up and I was told that I was ready to push. And I just remember being coached on how to push and not being able to feel anything. So I couldn't feel when my contractions were coming. I couldn't feel when I needed to push. I couldn't feel how to effectively push. And so things were just very difficult. I ended up pushing for 2 hours, zero progress whatsoever.
Mhm.
And it eventually ended in a vacuum assist and a little bit of a hemorrhage. And so I got a shot of Pitocin, and things just really ramped up after that epidural, which seems to be the story for so many.
Mhm.
And just after all of that, the exhaustion of pushing for so long and just everything that happened, I remember he was on my chest and I didn't even realize that he was there. I was so exhausted. I was so completely out of it. And
Mhm.
that just connection to my baby was not there. And I didn't feel it for probably weeks. Um, Unfortunately, we didn't have a good breastfeeding journey. I never was able to breastfeed. And it was just really hard mothering him in those early stages because I never felt that connection that I should have had.
Mhm.
Um, and so that's what kind of led me into my next birth. It was 5 years later. I just really had a lot that I needed to heal in those 5 years. I needed to kind of just ask questions about my birth and how things unfolded. I
Mhm.
went from just completely admiring my OB for saving me to realizing, okay, actually, maybe some of the interventions that they had recommended is actually what did the damage, and why I'm experiencing this trauma, and why I didn't have that connection to my baby and I wasn't able to successfully breastfeed, and all of these different things. So
Mhm.
um, once those 5 years kind of went by and I had done all this healing work, I decided, yeah,
Can I interject quickly? So you
yeah.
said that you had a difficult breastfeeding relationship with this
Mhm.
first child. How long did you like try to make this work, I guess is the right way to say, like continuing breastfeeding before you switched to a different way? And like how was that postpartum journey from the time of birth until you started kind of realizing and having like, oh, something was, off with the way that this baby came into the world, if you want to
Mhm.
that.
Yeah, so it was about a week. I went in to have a checkup
Mm,
for baby, and I realized that he had lost more weight
mm,
than they prefer.
mm,
Um, I knew nothing about any of this stuff, so I didn't know anything about that initial weight loss or anything like that.
mm,
But yeah, he just wasn't gaining weight. He lost like 3 pounds in 2 weeks, and so he just wasn't a healthy baby.
mm,
Wasn't getting enough milk. We were struggling immensely. Um, and so it was at that point that I was just kind of urged to supplement. And of course, I didn't have the support. I didn't know how to supplement while also working on my lactation, even though I was seeing lactation consultants. It was kind of just this pressure to formula feed. And so that's what we ended up going into. So, um, yeah. And I really didn't at the time put much effort into it as much as I probably would now.
mm.
Um, but yeah, I was just happy to have him fed at that point.
And it's
Um,
hard, like you said, if you didn't know what
yeah.
to expect, and then these people that you're going to seek help from are just saying, oh, just give them formula to feed them, and not actually trying to help you navigate how to get the baby on the breast in the right way or doing these
Mhm.
things. They just completely bypass that and just say, like, just do formula. It's easier. And it's like, it may
Exactly.
be easier, but it's also not necessarily the best option if you haven't given the mothers, the women, other ways to try and navigate why this baby is losing weight because they're not latching or, so on and so forth. It's really,
Hmm.
yeah, I'm sorry
Yeah.
to,
Yeah.
I'm sorry that you went through that, but I mean, it opened you up to other
It
experiences.
did. It really did.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so with the breastfeeding journey and that just not successfully working out, I just noticed that I didn't have like that intuitive knowing of how to care for him either.
Mm,
So, he'd be crying and I wouldn't just say, "Oh, I bet you he's hungry," or "I bet you he needs this," or maybe he just needs to be held. I
mm,
very much so was constantly just in this state of like, what does he need? What can I do? It felt like he was so foreign to me, like somebody had just handed me a baby that I've never had any experience with before. And
mm,
so that was definitely a struggle. And I probably felt that up until he was like toddler stage and we were starting, he was talking and things were different and I was starting to be able to communicate with him. But
mm,
yeah, it was really hard because at the time, just thought maybe it was because I was young. Maybe I don't really know what the heck I'm doing. But
mm,
then I started to realize, maybe it was this birth experience. Maybe it was the fact that I didn't connect with him, during those few hours postpartum, especially that golden hour. I started to see things about golden hour and different birth things that you could advocate for your birth. And I was just, wow, I didn't know any of this stuff existed. I had no idea. My OB never mentioned any of these things. She never asked me if I wanted to, who wanted to cut the cord. She never asked me about a placenta, nothing. I didn't even see my placenta. It was
mm,
just kind of whisked away, and I never even thought about it. And so it was just all these different things that I wish I had looked into, but I just didn't. And it wasn't something that seemed important to my
mm,
family. Like nobody said, maybe you should think about this or what are you going to do about this? There was no talk about it. And
mm,
even as I was kind of navigating those situations that came up, so I would kind of learn information and I would start to feel kind of this anger that, these things were ripped away from me. I would
mm,
have loved to see my placenta. I would have loved to, nurse within that first hour and have nice, skin to skin time and be uninterrupted. But so I'd kind of bring those things up to my family and just, try and voice, what I was feeling. And most of them would just kind of brush it off and just be like, well, that's just, how it went. Your birth was, so dangerous because, the baby had all these issues and he was stuck. And um, I went to my 6 week visit and I had brought a lot of questions for my OB. Just, I really wanted answers and I wanted to know, why this vacuum happened and why things happened. I had no idea, the things that come along with um, getting an epidural and, the cascade of interventions. I had no idea of any of those things. So I kind of asked her questions and she basically just kind of gave me a lot of fear instead of education. So when I asked her, why the vacuum was necessary, instead of saying, maybe it was because it was the epidural and you couldn't feel your contractions and you were laying on your back and you're in, not a great position to be birthing your baby.
mm,
Instead, she had just said that I had a small pelvis
mm,
and, it's very unlikely that I'd be able to have a baby that, was any bigger in previous or, coming pregnancies. And so that was really hard. I ended up leaving that appointment with all these extra fears. I was scared of pregnancy. I was scared of birth because now I felt like my body was broken. And I was like, gosh, if I have another baby now, I'm going to have to either do some kind of planned C-section or induction to make sure that this baby's no bigger than the 8-12 baby that I gave birth to.
mm,
And it just left a lot of fear. So, but it also brought up a lot of questions and a lot of different just introspection with myself, which kind of led up to my second birth experience. So,
mm,
yeah, so with my second, I kind of decided that I was going to go a little bit more radical, a little bit outside the box compared to what my family's used to. And I decided that I was going to have a home birth
mm,
um, with a midwife. That's what my partner at the time and I felt was the most comfortable. And so we found a local midwife and we were accepted into care, and it um, just felt really good. It felt like what we needed to do, and it felt like I finally was doing something that felt right to be bringing my baby into the world.
mm,
Um, and so we had a very uncomplicated pregnancy again, luckily, and I'm so thankful for that.
mm,
And I really liked my midwife. I really liked the way that she brought confidence to me. She really seemed to understand and listen to my concerns. And she was all for the hands-off birth that I was advocating for and preparing for.
Mhm.
And I just felt really great and in good hands. And I was really excited about this new birth experience. Um, and it wasn't until the last couple weeks of my pregnancy that things kind of took a turn.
Mhm.
I was getting measured. They were checking my fundal height, and she had said that baby was measuring 4 weeks ahead of time. And so she was starting to worry about baby size. And of course, that was the one biggest fear that I kind of carried into this pregnancy was how big is this baby?
Mhm.
And am I going to be able to give birth to this baby? And now I'm in a situation where I wouldn't be in a hospital to get these interventions that I felt like maybe I would need. And
Mhm.
so that brought a lot of fear into me. And so also a lot of stress in those last couple of weeks when I should have been preparing for birth and just getting into a good mental state.
Yeah.
Instead, I was just in this constant fear and panic mode.
Mhm.
Um, and so she was kind of getting me to go for these regular ultrasounds to continuously monitor his size, and he was showing as like above 9 pounds. And so she was panicked, and it was this constant every time we talked, she was telling me maybe we should plan for a C-section,
Oh
maybe we
God.
should talk about induction. Every time she would bring it up at every single appointment, and it just started to get to be so much. And
Mhm.
eventually I just kind of blocked her and I just stopped showing up to the appointments
Mhm.
because it was too much.
Mhm. Yeah, that's
And
a
I'm really glad now looking back that I did that because I really was in a fear state, and I'm glad that I didn't allow her pressure to kind of take over and for me to just go and get an induction or a C-section.
Mhm.
Um, and so I didn't talk to her for a couple weeks until my contractions started. And so finally, the day came. I think I was a couple days past my due date. And um, yeah, contractions started. Things were very slow. And luckily, this time I kind of knew to just kind of wait it out and labor, on my own, which was really nice. And
Mhm.
I didn't call her until probably 5 or 6 hours into it,
Mhm.
when things started to pick up a little bit more. And so I called her and she showed up. Thankfully, she didn't bring up anything about size or anything. She just kind of let it be.
Mhm.
And I labored at home. In my birth pool, I planned to have a water birth, but eventually that didn't happen. But I did at least labor in the pool, which felt really comforting and nice.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until transition hit and I was pushing that she finally started to intervene a little bit.
Mhm.
Um, and so transition hit and she kind of just changed. She went from being a fly on the wall and watching to wanting to check everything. So she wanted fetal heart rate, and she wanted to do a cervical check, and she wanted to do all these different things. And
Mhm.
when you're just in transition, you're just not really in the state of mind to be advocating for yourself, especially when your support people are also saying, yeah, maybe you should do that. So
Yeah.
I just said, okay, we were checking heart rate was fine. She went to do a cervical check, and I think it was like 8 centimeters or something. And while she was inside me, she went, oops, and she just broke my water. And I was really upset because this whole pregnancy I
Um,
had been envisioning an in-call birth. I don't know why. I just felt like that was what was going to happen for me. And
yeah.
to have her
Oh, I
inside
feel
me
that.
breaking my water, it broke my heart. And
Yeah.
I felt so much anger in that moment. And yeah, and it just really set the tone for how the rest of the birth kind of played out.
Oh, that's
And
terrible.
so
That's so awful that she would do that. She had no.
it was very violating at a time when you're so vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So anyways, we just kind of continued after that. Obviously my water had broken, and so things picked up really quickly. I went back into the pool for a little while and was pushing, and she was just very upset that she couldn't see how I was pushing and
Mm-hmm.
just starting to really throw all these different fears at me. Um, don't you want to know that he's in the right position? I can't see the way that his head's coming out. Maybe you should get out. And so,
Mm.
he's literally half his head was out of me, and they're pulling me out of the pool and trying to get me onto my bed so that they could see
Oh,
what was going on, which I wish I had advocated for myself, but it was
like
just,
you said before, you're in a
yeah,
state where you just can't. You're
no.
not
And
supposed to
it's
be.
the last thing you care about. Like at this point, I was just like, just get my baby out. I'm just so done with this. So, uh,
Oh.
yeah, so I get onto the bed, and of course, I'm on my back, legs out. She has my partner holding one leg, and my mom was holding the other. And all of a sudden, I'm getting my coach pushing that I didn't want. And instead of, pushing and delivering my baby on my own, she was just straight in there, hands in there, and just yanked him out. And it
Oh.
was just it was just devastating, and I just felt like I was at this point just like zoned out. I didn't know what was even happening anymore. I think it was just kind of like the state of protecting myself. I
Mhm.
just kind of I was out. Like I wasn't even paying attention to what was going on anymore.
Yeah.
And so during this time, I don't really know what was going on, but I do have birth photos that were taken. And so this is kind of like where I piece things together. But
Mhm.
so yeah, she pulled baby out. He was quite large, and he was doing the typical gargling, trying to, catch his breath and take his first breath. And they panicked. They saw how big he was, and so he immediately got oxygen. I was immediately getting a fundal massage from the second midwife, which was horrible, of
Mhm.
course. And I remember just yelling at her, telling her to stop, and she wasn't. And of course, with a fundal massage comes bleeding. And so I
Yep.
was gushing, and they
Mhm.
immediately panicked. They called an ambulance. I didn't even know that they had called an ambulance. There was just so much chaos going on. And so,
Mhm.
um, yeah, baby was out, and I think I held him for a couple minutes on my chest and was just trying to get to know him. Finally, he was crying, and so
Mhm.
things settled down for a little bit, and then all of a sudden EMS is coming in, and so I didn't get any really like my golden hour or anything that felt good.
Mhm.
Um, and so baby was taken away, the cord was pulled on, and they yanked my placenta out, and that was kind of whisked off. And it was just really upsetting because all of a sudden I was completely alone, and it was just me and this EMS guy who was giving me my IV and just checking my vitals. My
Mhm.
baby was off in the other room getting checked, and I believe they were weighing him and, getting him ready to be transferred to the hospital. And it was just upsetting because I could hear him cry. And, that again was the thing that I wanted, was to have that golden hour. Like it was just so important to me, and I wasn't again having it. And so it
Mhm.
was just heartbreaking because, you think that you're making the right decisions by doing it at home and having a midwife, and everything's going to be so natural. And it was more traumatic this time because I knew
Mhm.
these things. I knew about the golden hour, and I knew about all the things that could be possible, and I was not having them at all. So I
Mhm.
had to advocate to even have my baby come in the ambulance with me. Otherwise, he would have had to be driven. And I wasn't sure even if he was going to be checked in to the room with me or not. And it
Right.
was just so much stress that I didn't need. And
Yeah.
um,
No
once
mother
I
does
finally,
that
yeah,
right
well,
after birth.
exactly.
That's absolutely terrible.
Yeah. And so it wasn't until like 3 hours after he was born that I finally was able to just like look at him, take him in, and breastfeed for the first time.
That's
And
awful. Oh.
yeah, and of course he just we were having a hard time latching, and the breastfeeding struggle happened all over again. And
Mhm.
um, I realized that they'd actually given him a bottle of formula before they had given him to me. So he had
Oh.
already been fed, and it was just all these things that I didn't even know about.
Mhm.
Again, my placenta was gone, and I didn't get to see it, and just all these different things were happening, and I just felt so out of control. And
Mhm.
um, yeah, just not a great experience. And again, just made for so many struggles in that early postpartum period. So
Mhm.
definitely a lot of pain associated with everything. And um, it was just hard. He was 11 pounds. So, I mean, he was a very big baby. He was
Mhm.
quite a large baby, but I'm glad he was, because that did dispel kind of that fear of my pelvis being too small. Because I had, even though there was a lot of interventions and she reached in me and she pulled him out, I still, vaginally birthed a very large baby. And so I knew that I could do it at this point. And my new fear that I was kind of carrying with me was this hemorrhage that I had. So um, that was kind of the fear that my midwife held with me for all of our postpartum checks, was my bleeding, telling me all these things about how I might have a bleeding disorder or a
Mhm.
clotting disorder and just all these different things. And that was hard. That was really hard too. So just feeling like your body's broken and trying to also figure out everything. So
Mhm.
um, with breastfeeding this time around, I tried to see a lactation support, and I went private this time because sometimes the ones at the hospital aren't greatest. They would come in and peek on me and they would just say, "You look like you're doing great," and they would leave. And I'm like, he's not eating, so I don't know how I'm doing great.
Right.
Um, so I went and I hired my own private ones, and definitely got some support, definitely was able to kind of voice my needs and my fears and my struggles. And at that point I was diagnosed with IGT, which is insufficient glandular tissue. And so
Mhm.
it kind of made sense as why I struggled so much like the first time and why I'm struggling now.
Mm.
But I also just felt like, I should be able to breastfeed some. I should be able to have some kind of connection still with my son. And it was just really hard. But so I eventually just left those appointments. I stopped seeing her because it was like, well, if I need a supplement, I'll supplement. And if not, I'm just going to make sure my baby is fed. But I want to make sure that I'm still having that bond with him. It was really important to make sure that I had this foundation this time.
Mhm.
Um, and so I went home and I just kind of decided, I'm not going to do the pumping that she says. She wanted me feeding him every hour and pumping in between that. So I was basically like,
Gosh.
I had something on my boobs constantly. Like,
Yeah.
that's just ridiculous when you're trying to heal. Like, I couldn't eat. I felt like I couldn't go to the bathroom. It was
Mhm.
ridiculous. And it was way too much for my mental health during such like a crazy time. Um, and so I decided I'm like, I'm never gonna pump again. Get rid of that. If my supply doesn't stay, that's fine. And I ended up just breastfeeding him until he was like 18 months old. And
Wow.
so I feel like you just have to kind of check out of all the crap
Mhm.
and just do what felt right. And I'm so glad I did.
Mhm.
We definitely struggled for a little while, and I did have to supplement in the beginning until eventually my supply built up. But it did, and I was able to breastfeed him up until 18 months. And so, yeah, it's just
Amazing.
everything, from the birth until this postpartum period. I started to learn that you really have to just kind of listen to your own instincts,
Mhm.
and I'm so glad that I did. So,
Mhm.
um, yeah, that's kind of just what brought me to baby number three. And this last birth that I had was um, definitely a very healing experience, and I'm so grateful for that. But
Mhm.
it's all because I got those lessons and I learned all of the hard things. I learned that you can't be checking out and you can't put your care into somebody else's hands.
Mhm.
Nobody else knows your body or your baby like you do.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what I took into this next pregnancy, and
Mhm.
the lesson that I really had to learn, I guess, the hard way. Um, and so I decided for my next baby that I was going to go even more radical and scare my family even more, and just go completely unassisted for my prenatal care.
Mhm.
Um, I
And how
didn't.
did you come to that decision now, going from working with that medical midwife to just being like, I'm not doing anything? Where did that come from? Did you start like doing more research into birth and how it could be different, how you could make it different?
Mhm. Yeah, so during my second pregnancy, that's kind of whenever I started getting into the birth work and becoming a birth keeper.
Okay.
And so I was diving deep into all things birth, basically. During that pregnancy, I had no idea that free birth was a thing.
Mhm.
I really thought that the most radical way you could go was with a midwife,
Okay.
which is kind of ridiculous, but
Mhm.
I just didn't know that it was a thing. And
Mhm.
it was just, after that pregnancy, and I remember I was nursing him one night
Mm.
and just kind of like researching like
Mm.
how can you have a pregnancy? Like, is it legal to have a pregnancy and a birth without somebody? Because
Mm.
I just really didn't want that. Like, I didn't like that answer of it just being a midwife. And
Mm.
I came across free birth, and I came across, all these mothers that were giving birth unassisted, and
Mm.
it just felt so empowering. And I was like, yes, okay, this is my people. This is exactly what I want to get into. And so that's when I started working with mothers who were birthing unassisted, and
Mm.
it just felt right. And so I had seen a bunch of different births that were unassisted previous to me and my journey, and so I felt so empowered and so liberated in doing this. And so that's kind of what brought me to it. I was like, I've seen all these mothers have this amazing experience. This is exactly what I want. I'm
Mm.
definitely doing it this time, even though my family thinks I'm absolutely crazy. But so yeah, that's kind of how it started. And I went on to have just this amazing unassisted pregnancy.
Mm.
I decided that I definitely didn't want anything medical. I didn't get the tests. I didn't get any ultrasounds. I did see a private midwife once, just quickly. She did like a quick fetoscope check to get a heart rate, just so that I had the documentation, because I had seen a couple of my clients really struggle to
Mm.
register their babies after. So I wanted to make sure I had some kind of documentation of my pregnancy. And so that's all I did, was get a quick little fetoscope check, and never saw her again. And the rest of the time, I just kind of did my own thing. I took baths and I meditated and I communicated with my baby. And um, I would use a fetoscope if I felt called. And if not, I just kind of trusted that things were working out beautifully. And they were, of course. So um, yeah, it just felt really amazing and uplifting. And the only thing that I was kind of worried about or working through was just fear of bleeding. And I wish that I didn't have that fear, but I did. And I just kind of did as much research as I could as to, what would cause a hemorrhage and what I could do to avoid a hemorrhage. And
Mm.
I was doing everything right by being unassisted and by avoiding every intervention possible during my birth. So that
Yeah.
was really empowering, and that felt really good. And
Mm.
just made me more confident going into the birth. And then also just really wanting to set up for postpartum. So I spent a lot of my pregnancy worrying more so about postpartum, making sure that I was supported,
Mm.
making sure that I actually had, the golden hour and a very long restful
Mhm.
period. I wanted to just be like in bed with my baby for like 6 weeks. I really wanted to soak it all in, and I felt like that would heal all of my previous experiences, and it really did.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, once my pregnancy was kind of nearing the end, I did feel kind of the annoyance of waiting on baby, but obviously just kind of surrendering to, the timing of baby deciding when their birthday is. And um, I was feeling a lot of daily stress. Just, I really wanted to know when they were going to come. At the time, I was a single mom. And so I just wanted to make sure that when baby came, I would know that it was, actually labor time, because I had been having prodromal labor for weeks. I
Mm.
think it started at about 35 weeks. So just like every night, I'd have these contractions that seemed to be building up, and then they would fizzle out completely. And so, like, I'd have all my people alerted, tell everybody, I'd have my kids being watched, and then it would go away. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, it was just so much surrender and so much just so many lessons in those last few weeks that I was not expecting. And so I was just kind of praying and hoping that labor would start with my water breaking, because that just seemed like something that was just such a like a perfect sign that things were finally starting.
Mm.
Um, so kind of getting near my due date, it was my first son's birthday coming up, and so I was like, okay, baby, today, please, no contractions, none of this prodromal labor. Let
Mm.
me have my day so that I can kind of prepare for your big brother's birthday tomorrow. He
Mhm.
is so big on birthdays. It's his favorite
Mhm.
day of the year. And I don't want two babies on his day because I feel like that would just break his heart. And he would tell me all the time, please just don't have the baby on my birthday because that would just ruin my birthday party. And I was like,
Aw.
okay, I will try my very best.
Oh.
And so it was the day before his birthday, and we're kind of just, I'm out, I'm getting all the balloons and different things ready, and I was not thinking at all about labor or birth, and it just felt so nice to have a day where I wasn't stressing or
Mhm.
worried about what was going to happen or when they were going to come. And after I was done preparing, done getting groceries and all these different things, my mom asked me if I wanted to go for dinner. And I thought that'd be a great way of kind of ending this really nice day. And I was feeling great for the first time ever and good
Mhm.
energy. And so I went out for dinner with her. And after we were finished eating, I remember just kind of sitting there in the booth and peeing myself. And so I got up and I went to the bathroom and I realized it was my water.
Ah.
And so as I'm like bending down to get on the toilet, it was just the biggest gush ever. And I was like, this is what I've been waiting for, but I told you
Yeah.
not today. Come
Oh.
on. And so of course, like the one day that I told baby not to come, they decided they're coming. And so I just kind of like came out of the bathroom, just like the biggest smile on my face. And I told my mom, I got to go home. And I don't know why I didn't say, hey, my water broke, or I didn't explain myself at all. I just said, hey, I got to go. And I just up and left. And she called me and she goes, I was gonna pay for dinner. Like you didn't have to just up and leave. I was like, oh, I wasn't worried about the tab. My water broke. And so I kind of left and she followed shortly behind me
Mm.
and we just met at home. I wasn't having any contractions or anything yet, just continuously leaking water. And so
Mm.
I spent the next 3 hours just kind of waiting on baby to come. And so I was setting up my birth space and just kind of getting things ready
Mm.
and just waiting on these contractions to start. And so once hour 3 came, I was kind of like, okay, maybe I need to just kind of calm myself down. I was really running on adrenaline. I was really excited. And so I decided to go take a bath
Mm.
and turn on my birth playlist and just kind of like zone out and get ready for this labor. And so I'm just kind of sitting in the tub and talking to my baby. And I just finally kind of said, okay, I'm ready now. And um, right as I was saying that, I got this very, very, very intense contraction that felt like I was hit by a truck.
Wow.
And I was just, oh my gosh, it lasted a full minute and it just kind of, oh my goodness, okay, we are ready and we're started and here we go. And
Mm.
so I very quickly got out of the tub because I really just wanted a land birth. And I really wanted to be grounded and really feel into everything that this birth had in store for me, as much as it was, painful and everything. I wanted to feel it and I wanted to really enjoy it and, um, yeah, just feel every sensation and just let it take me wherever it decided to go. So
Mm.
I kind of got out of the pool and I got into my bed, which is kind of the space that I hoped and was envisioning for my birth.
Mm.
And I had about an hour of these very steady contractions that were like a minute or two apart. I wasn't timing them, but they were coming quite back to back
Mm.
and just very intense. And I remember just feeling out very quickly like I was kind of working against them. I was, bracing myself, and I was starting to have a lot of fears come up. The pain was more intense than I've ever experienced. Even more so than, my last birth, which was also vaginal and unmedicated. And
Mm.
so I started just having all these fears come up, which I wasn't expecting because I was so prepared and I was so ready for everything.
Mm.
And that's kind of when my birth keeper brain would kind of kick in and be like, "You're in transition. You're okay. You're getting close." And so it was really nice that I had this knowledge this time, and I was able to kind of comfort myself as I was going through it because I had my mom there, but she didn't really know what was going on, and
Mhm.
she has no knowledge whatsoever of unassisted birth. I tried to prepare her, but there's only so much you can do whenever you're the one who's given birth, right? So,
Wow.
yeah, just in that transition period, and it really just was so much more than I was prepared for, so much more painful. And I don't know why I was expecting to have this like orgasmic and just very pain-free birth, but sometimes you just hear about unassisted birth just being so beautiful. And so I was like, my last birth, wasn't very painful, thankfully. I really went through those contractions quite well, and the only thing that was really painful with his birth was the midwife inside me pulling him out. And
Right.
so I really thought this time it'll be even, it'll just be so flowy and easeful and peaceful and just so exciting, but it wasn't that way at all. And
Mm.
um, it was very painful. I remember just like screaming this time, whereas last time I was very not vocal at all. I was very quiet.
Mm.
And yeah, just trying to keep myself as calm as possible while it felt like I was ripping in half. But it was just happening so quickly, and I was not prepared for that after two births that were 18 hours and 15 hours. So I really was expecting this slow progression, and this time I had a very quick 3-hour birth. And so I
Wow.
wasn't prepared for it. um, but yeah, it was intense, but um, I knew that that pushing stage was coming up very soon, and that's kind of what I was using to kind of comfort myself, because I remember previously that pushing had felt really nice because it felt like you were actually making progress and you were working with your contractions, and
Mm.
um, you were in kind of like control of the power that was kind of going through you. And so
Right.
I was excited that pushing was coming, and instead, I just felt this crazy sensation that my body was just kind of like vomiting him out. And I wasn't prepared for that. I remember hearing about fetal ejection reflex. I remember my clients saying that they have experienced it, but I've never experienced it myself. I've always had long pushing periods. And
Mhm.
so I just didn't know what was happening. I was like, is this the fetal ejection reflex? Oh my gosh. And my mom's like, what even is that? Like, it was just such a weird learning experience for me. But yeah, very quickly, and it was exactly as my clients had described, and um, just felt like I was birthing him without any control, and so I just was kind of bracing myself and letting it happen, and um, eventually I hit this point where that kind of stopped a little bit, and
Mhm.
it felt like I was kind of hitting like a brick wall. It felt like something was kind of stuck. It wasn't feeling like it was downward flowing out of me the
Mhm.
way that it should have. And looking back now, after the fact, I realized that he was a little bit stuck. He had a little bit of a shoulder dystocia.
Mhm.
Um, and so once his head emerged, it was about 5 minutes before the rest of his body came, and I had probably 4 or 5 contractions in between that time.
Okay.
Um, but it felt still so peaceful, and I still felt so in control, and so
Did
I
you
could just kind of,
did you do any like position changes to kind of help
yeah.
unstick him when you felt that way?
Yeah, so when I was pushing, I was kind of in all fours, kind of upright. And
Mhm.
that's kind of the position that I had been picturing birthing in my
Mhm.
whole pregnancy. And so I was in that position and kind of just realized that, yeah, he's definitely stuck. And so I did like a little bit of wiggling, and
Mhm.
that got his arm out. He had a nuchal arm. And so we got that out. And then he just was still a little bit stuck. And so eventually I kind of got my leg propped up, which is what I felt like I needed to do. And he slipped out immediately as soon as I got my leg up. And
Yeah.
it just felt so natural. I didn't, have, these scary thoughts or anything in my head at the time.
Mhm.
And it just felt so easy once that part happened, um, which was really nice. And he came out, and I thought for sure he must be small. He must be just, my smallest baby yet, because it was so
Mhm.
easy once things kind of went going.
Mhm.
And no, he wasn't. He was my biggest baby. He was 11 pounds and 2 ounces. And
Wow.
just, it just was so amazing that, all of these things happened, and he was so large. And
Mhm.
um, it was nice to kind of also kind of look off to my mom, and she was just in complete shock because she has never experienced a birth that was so peaceful obviously it was a little bit chaotic because I was screaming and things like that. But at the end, it was peaceful. I didn't have people interjecting. I didn't have interventions. I had no fear. It was all just, happening as it was meant to. And it was really beautiful. And I was able to kind of just like unwrap his cord, which was kind of like around his shoulders, and bring him up to my chest. And I just kind of instinctively rubbed him down, and he was crying. And it was just really beautiful and really nice. And I was so excited to kind of sit back and take him in, but also I was so excited for my placenta. I don't know why, but it
Yeah.
was just, I never had those experiences before. And so there was so much emphasis on getting like this placenta out and being able to just check it out. And
Mhm.
when it finally came like 2 hours later, I did. I just kind of like checked it out for a while and held it in my hands. My mom thought I was crazy, but I was like, I've never seen one of
Yeah.
my own before.
Yeah.
And I've worked with them as a birth keeper. I've done encapsulation, and I've done prints and different things for clients, but I've never seen my own, which is always so sad for me to say to them, that I work with placentas, but I've never seen my own. And so taking that in, taking my baby in, and not having anybody bother me for just hours and hours. It was so, so nice. And
Mhm.
um, I immediately just latched him, and it felt so good because I've never been able to latch a baby immediately after birth. And he was sucking perfectly, and our
Mhm.
breastfeeding journey has been absolutely perfect. He's never lost too much weight. He's like 13 pounds now, and he's gained all of his weight back, and he's just doing amazing. And um, just everything that I ever wanted and envisioned for myself and
Oh,
for everybody. Honestly, this is all I've ever wanted for my clients. And
yeah. Oh, that's
it was
so
just so
amazing.
beautiful.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
sounds like it. You finally got that peaceful golden hour that you had wanted in both of your previous
Hmm.
births. Oh, I'm so happy.
We sucked it in all night long. I didn't have any visitors or anything until the next day. And
Mm.
yeah, made sure that I really got that extended rest period of just taking them all in and
Oh,
enjoying myself. Yeah.
amazing. I'm so happy for you. That just warms my heart
Oh,
so
thank
much.
you.
Yeah. Wow. That's
Yeah.
cool. Oh, your stories are so lovely.
Oh,
Um,
thank you.
just a quick question. Were your previous two children, were they there at the third birth, or were they sleeping, or did they witness anything, or has
Yeah.
your first child witnessed the both births of the youngest kids?
Yeah, so with my second, my oldest, he was in the house, but he told me very clearly he did not want to see any blood.
Okay.
And so we called him in quickly before I was taken off in the ambulance. He kind of saw his brother for a couple of minutes, and then we had to kind of go. But
Mhm.
this time he was actually sleeping. It was bedtime, so he was asleep. And my middle child was off with his dad. So it was the next morning after I had like a really restful sleep. It was really nice. I woke up and I told everybody, okay, I'm ready for visitors now. And
Mhm.
my oldest woke up and he came and checked out his brother. And then my middle kiddo was dropped off and came and checked him out too. And yeah, it was so nice to
Mhm.
have them be part of it too, and see them. Hmm.
Wow. Oh, that's your stories are just so beautiful, and to see the progression, like you said,
Yes.
you didn't know in the very beginning, and then you started learning and taking responsibility for the choices that you wanted to make and for the things that were happening in the second birth. You didn't get those because you had a very hands-on midwife who all of a sudden did the bait and switch and, sabotaged a lot of the things that you wanted, but it didn't stop you from, continuing to move forward and be like, all right, well, that was another experience. Now what can I do to make it even better? And then you had this amazing birth experience and birthed an 11-pound baby that, like
Yes.
you said, your pelvis is probably too small to birth these babies, and you birth
No kidding.
two 11-pound babies. Like, my
Right?
goodness,
I know.
it's amazing. Your body is amazing. It's,
It
yeah,
is.
wow.
Yes. And I just take it into all my clients that I work with, and in the future,
Mhm.
hopefully, they can kind of bypass all of the hard learning lessons that I had to do, and I hope that they can just, do it right the first time and get
Mhm.
all the beautiful birth in. But yeah, had
Yeah.
to go through all of the lessons the hard way, but it
Right.
brought me finally to the destination that I found. So I'm really grateful for that.
Yeah. Oh, and I'm so grateful to be able to hear this story and to be able to share it with, because
Hmm.
people need to hear this. It's such a
Yes.
presumptive story of your power and your strength and your commitment to getting
Hmm.
what you want, having that golden hour, spending that immediate time with your babe, having your little one latch on, instantly after birth, which you never had. So, oh,
Hmm.
that's just so beautiful. That just makes my heart feel so warm and happy for you and your children.
Thank you.
Wow, yeah. Um, is there anything else that you would like to share about either three of your birth experiences or your journeys of motherhood that you feel called to speak on?
Um, I think just this time around, the biggest lesson is just kind of realizing that really just tuning into your intuition, it really affects your postpartum period. And I was really excited to kind of see the way that things would play out in the early postpartum and then kind of beyond. I'm just past the 6 week mark now, so the early postpartum period's kind of over, but still very much so postpartum. But I just feel so connected to him this time, and I'm so grateful for that. I really feel like I know exactly how to tend to his needs. I know his cries. I know just everything, and it
Mhm.
just feels so much more intuitive and
Wow.
right this time. So
Wow.
yeah, just something that I definitely want to make sure that I kind of emphasize with my clients is,
Mhm.
making sure that you have all of these opportunities and you really have to plan right from pregnancy in order to make sure that, your every step that you take affects your motherhood journey. So
Mhm.
yeah.
Wow. Yeah, thank you so much
Mhm.
for that beautiful wisdom. Um,
Mhm.
and you said you're a birth keeper, so do you have
Yeah.
contact information if anyone is in your area or anyone wants to connect with you to talk maybe more about the work that you do? How would these listeners
Mhm.
do that?
Yeah, so I'm on Facebook and mostly on Instagram. That's where you find me the most. It's Spearmint and Sage.
Mhm.
So that's just where you can find me, and I'm on there quite a lot.
Good,
Got a very beautiful community on Instagram, and I just love it. So
good,
yeah, definitely connect if you
good.
feel called. Mhm.
Wow, amazing. Thank you so much, Josie, for this talk and sharing your stories and your words.
Yes, thank you for letting me talk about it. I love talking about birth, and it's like you don't have enough experiences and people to just talk about your birth with. So I'm so grateful to have this space to do that. So
Oh,
thank you.
wonderful.
Yeah.
Oh, good, wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you, sisters, so much for listening to this episode of the Free Birthing Color podcast. If you'd like to work with me one on one in a primal activation session, donate to the podcast, or to have your story featured here or in the blog, go to primalwomanportal.com for all the information to do so. Did you want to connect with our guest speaker? You can find all her information linked within the show notes. And if you have time, please subscribe, write a review, and tell a friend to have a listen so that this podcast and these stories of women birthing in their total power can be shared far and wide. Don't forget to check out the show notes for information on the Earth Daughters Women's Festival, the Breach Without Borders workshop, and much more. New episodes drop every Thursday morning, so stay tuned for the next amazing story to be shared on any platform that you prefer to listen to your podcasts on, or watch these episodes on the Free Birthing in Color YouTube page. And remember, your voice and your story matters. So if you're a woman of color or an Indigenous woman who's had a wild pregnancy and or birth outside of the medical system, submit your story because it's so important that your voice is heard and celebrated in your radical journey of pregnancy, birth, and motherhood.